What's up, everybody? Couch Mills here, coming at you with a brand new Valorant video. And in this video, we gotta talk about game-breaking bugs that are destroying Valorant and a new article that talks about lag, latency, and gameplay consistency from Riot themselves. This is all we gotta break down, so make sure you watch to the end. But the GameLeap website's the best place if you want to quickly climb past your peak, whether it's Plat, Diamond, Immortal, or even Radiant. You gotta go check out our in-depth tips and tricks and pro match breakdowns right now down below. Now, before we jump into the article, I did want to showcase this JETT bug that was added in 4.07 that will probably get fixed soon, but if it's not, it completely breaks JETT. Basically, if you dash as your ultimate is ending with the JETT knives, you will be stuck in basically an animation where you can't get out of and you're just completely helpless. This is most common with the right click and dash away, but take a look at this clip here. Now, the next thing that we actually need to talk about is the Valorant gameplay consistency update. And this is an update talking about game-to-game inconsistencies that have been reported and things that they're doing to fix a lot of the problems. So this is what they are hearing from the development side. First off, I'm feeling a different amount of delay from one game to the next, even when my network conditions are stable. This is an incredibly common complaint where players feel like some games they can just tap everybody, and then in the immediate next game, things just feel way off and they're not able to, even though their ping is identical. The next thing that they're hearing is, quote, "It feels like other players can respond to me faster / slower from one game to the next," kind of talking about the same problems that I just alluded to. As a continuation, the third thing they're hearing is, quote, "I feel very inconsistent when I'm playing Valorant. Some games I'm the one tapping headshots, but in the next game, it's happening to me." And then finally, I feel high ping players have an unfair advantage when peeking me compared to low ping players. Now, I'm sure they're gonna clarify that fourth point more in a second, but they actually talked about it a long time ago, and that's just true. High ping creates more peekers advantage, but it doesn't really matter who has the high ping. Whether it's the opponent or you, if there is any player that has high ping, swingers get more inherent peekers advantage, but they'll probably break that down in a second. I don't want to get too into it. Now, they want to break this up into two separate categories. First is individual player performance, and the second part is competitive integrity or fairness. So for the individual player performance, it acknowledges that flow state is a thing. Certain players could be in the zone and achieve a higher level of focus, whether their game sense or awareness is working really well, their reaction times are decreased, and their flicks are landing with higher accuracy. So this is a consistency in performance that every high school player strives to have, and a lot of players perform incredibly inconsistent across matches. And to further complicate things, your opponents have skill levels that fluctuate and can actually directly impact your own perceived performance. The example they give is if the enemy JETT is feeling it, her low reaction times and high accuracy may be indistinguishable from her having more time to line up a shot due to network advantage. So basically, here's their challenge. Setting aside individual player performance, how can we quantify and measure fairness in a match? Are there any underlying issues in core systems that may cause combat to feel different from one match to the next? And what tools or data can we provide you to help distinguish between your performance and fairness issues in the game? So basically, you could be feeling the game is very inconsistent, but it could be your own skill and the enemies playing well or just playing different rather than the system itself. But they're not trying to not acknowledge that people feel this way, and they do think that there could be things going on behind the scenes. It's just hard for them to gather that data. But they go into more detail and they investigate three different prongs, which is latency, correctness, and peekers with high ping. First off, latency. So the first thing that you need to check is if your latency is solid. Whether your ping is solid, you could turn on the ping counter as a setting in game. And while this doesn't solve all the reports, it is a fair amount of reports happen when there is some inconsistency in your latency or your ping. But as they do state, there are several reports that come in even when the measurements all appear stable. So basically at that point, it leaves it down to two possible options: network buffering and network jitter. So to go over the basics, the server receives a constant stream of input data from your client, which it then validates and plays back into its authoritative simulation of the world. It needs to process your inputs as smooth as 128 per second, but variable network conditions and client frame rates means that it often receives player inputs in uneven, unpredictable bursts. Network buffering attempts to smooth gameplay by introducing a small amount of delay before processing player input data to hide inconsistencies in how packets arrive. In addition, network jitter refers to the variance in how long it takes sent packets to reach the destination. If jitter is low, the server receives packets from you at reliable intervals. It helps keep buffer times extremely low since it knows that the next packet will arrive. If jitter is high, the server needs to delay your inputs by a larger amount on average because they are frequent, unpredictable gaps between one packet and the next. The same goes for how your client receives enemy movement data and world updates from the server. So basically, in order to target this problem, this is what they're reviewing. Is network buffering behavior consistent from one match to the next? How well does Valorant buffering handle long-term jitter? Does it effectively minimize processing delays while providing smooth movement? And how quickly does buffer recover from short-term disruptions, burst of packet loss, frame rate throttling from alt-tabbing, etc. So far, they've already acknowledged some minor improvements that they can add to help with this latency problem. First off is when the network buffering jumps in size due to the network or performance hiccup, the system takes longer than they like to recover. So during that short recovery window, you can actually experience higher end-to-end latency, which would actually cause more needed delay and smoothing, which could actually affect your game even if your system is still low latency. So this is most notable when alt-tabbing, when background frame rate throttling is set to a low value, but they're going to implement improvements to address this coming soon. The next thing is Valorant minimizes that net buffering to keep your input latency and your view of other players as close to real time as possible. But for high jitter networks, they've noticed that this can cause a cyclic pattern of latency adjustments every couple of seconds as they prioritize low latency first, but then account for the network jitter on top of that. So they're working on modifying buffering behavior to better account for this specific scenario. And these are just two of other things that they're trying to investigate and work on to help solve some of these issues that might be causing some of this inconsistency in the latency and your bullet registration and the jitter that is happening in your game. So the next section is correctness, and basically this is like a sanity check is what they call it, where they want to make sure that the client and the server are actually agreeing or disagreeing on the shots being processed. So for example, it could mean you're playing well on your client side, but the server might always not agree with your results. So let's say your movement accuracy or recoil states at the time of shot. So like for instance, on your individual server, you properly counter-strafed or you have no movement inaccuracy and you have that first shot accuracy or something close to it, but because you're still slightly moving on the server side, hypothetically, the shot might register as inaccurate. That's just one example. But so far, with all of their investigations, they haven't seen correctness to be a problem at all, and everything looks correct and is lining up with their system. So this is something that they're going to keep monitoring, but it doesn't look like this is part of the problem currently. The last thing is peakers with high ping, and they already have talked about this in detail and they actually link the previous article, but specifically they're going to go into their core system audits and doing some work to help investigate as to why players feel this way around high ping. Keep in mind that some of this also might be placebo if you see someone with high ping in your games, but I think ultimately the best way to counteract this is to try to keep lobbies with as little ping as possible. Well, I really do love the fact that Valorant is adding more and more servers and you can choose which servers you queue into. I think that certain types of servers should not be allowed for everybody. And what I mean by that is if you have like maybe 3 or 4 better ping options, you shouldn't be able to queue into a lobby that has high ping when you could queue into multiple lower ping options just so that you don't ruin the competitive integrity, because ultimately this problem will be less and less the smaller the pings are. In fact, the lower the ping, the better for the competitive integrity of Valorant. So I think this is a really important issue. That being said, I really want to pass the question off to you. How have you been feeling about your inconsistency in games? Do you feel like it's your own personal performance, or do you feel like it's something that's happening behind the scenes? And how has your ping been, and what is the average ping you get in your lobbies? Definitely let me know down below. And the GameLeap website's the best place to build up that consistency and just dominate your lobbies, regardless of your ping, your latency, whatever. You're gonna pop off and kill everyone. So do yourself a favor and go check it out right now down below.